What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here with you guys as always, and I am here with a very special guest. We are obviously previewing the Seattle Seahawks game coming up. I am joined by Brian Nemhauser of HawkBlogger. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great, Nick. How you doing?
I am doing well. If you want to see the opposite of this, because I went on HawkBlogger earlier this week, make sure to go check that out. There's great stuff over on YouTube and has a great Seahawks show over there. But since we've talked, there's been some developments, I think, on the Seahawks front. A lot of injuries have popped up here for the Seahawks. You look at Devin Witherspoon, Julian Love, others as well have been kind of popping up. Is this going to be a secondary that looks significantly different than what we're used to seeing?
Yeah. Well, it was a very physical first week between the Seahawks and 49ers in a pretty intense divisional game. And both teams came out a little worse for the wear. The 49ers, the one that got the victory that helps lick their wounds a little bit. But yeah, wasn't clear that Devin Witherspoon was injured in that game. He finished the game. He played throughout, and he just showed up on the injury report Wednesday as did not practice with a knee. Did not practice again Thursday, and generally, especially early in the season, you'd kind of expect a player like that to not actually play this weekend. But we'll find out more from Mike McDonald and the team's final injury report today. They also had Julian Love, their safety, who started out with a limited participant with a hamstring injury on Wednesday. He did not practice on Thursday, although he was doing a lot of work on the side. So I think he's a little bit more questionable. But you've also already got Nick Emanwari, the other Nick, as he's known, who is a high draft pick for them and a big part of their plans as a big nickel in that defense. And so now you could be down your big nickel, your nickel, and starting safety. And it honestly had a lot of us on the sidelines yesterday at practice trying to figure out who would be their nickel corner if all these guys are out.
So I'm assuming the outside guys would be Job and Woolen. Shaq Griffin just got elevated. I'm guessing he might factor into that. Kobe Bryant plays safety now. Could play corner. I mean, there's a lot of questions there. So what would be your best guess? Let's say all three of those guys are out. What
Yeah,
would be
I mean,
your best guess?
the top three corners would seem to be pretty logically Woolen, Job, and Shaquille Griffin. At the same time, none of those guys have real track record as nickel cornerbacks. So there's a chance that Darian Kendrick, who the Seahawks claimed off waivers from the Los Angeles Rams, who played mostly outside corner his whole career, but this preseason for the Rams got a lot of time at the nickel position. It's possible that he could slide in there at nickel. It's also possible that DeAnthony Bell, former Cleveland Brown, who the Seahawks signed, could be a bit of a big nickel answer for them and that they'd use him at safety. I think the last thing that's possible, but probably less likely, they could play more base defense and not have the nickel out there as much and maybe see if the Steelers can pass them out of that kind of defense.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. The Steelers are going to play a lot of 12 and 13. That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
what they do. That's their identity.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, I think, to play a bunch of base. But so talk to me about the rest of this defense. I looked at the tape and I watched the tape and I thought Tank Lawrence was, to be quite honest with you, incredible in that game. He's still got it. I think he's still a really good player. I've been a big Boye Mafe fan. He looked really good. Leonard Williams is a big addition there. Do we think Jaron Reed's going to play? He took a step back yesterday. Was older guy. He's a veteran, but will he be out there? And then it seems like some attrition at least at inside linebacker. You have Tyrese Knight with a little bit of up and down play. Maybe won't play as much. Drake Thomas maybe going to get in there a little bit.
Yeah. The Jaron Reed injury situation was definitely one to watch as well. This is a guy that was double teamed in week one more than anybody but DeForest Buckner, which I think would surprise many people, and has been a really productive interior player for the Seahawks for a while. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with Reed. I would guess, with a back, they'd find a way to treat that and he'd play, but hard to say. Anytime there's a DMP on Thursday, you have to kind of wonder. The linebacker position, Tyrese Knight was coming off an injury and looked like he wasn't up to full speed. He was a little slow and was beaten on some routes. Drake Thomas is an undersized backer who I think has been getting nothing but praise from the coaching staff. And, he excels a little bit more in coverage, but is a pretty smart guy. And this could be a chance. It's possible that he will be a starter this week next to Ernest Jones. So it is kind of interesting to see some potential changes that are not injury related on that defense after what was a pretty promising initial performance in that game. But, to your point about DeMarcus Lawrence, he's certainly still a monster against the run game. Ernest Jones was talking yesterday that at this point, he kind of looks at DeMarcus Lawrence before the snap because he figures he's going to give Ernest a little bit of an idea of what's coming because he just trusts his ability to read the offense so well. But look, the Seahawks defense has a lot of playmakers on there, from Leonard Williams to Byron Murphy, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall. So there's a lot of guys that can make plays, but it is looking like it's going to be a diminished version of the crew that ran out there in week 1.
Yeah, and I think that's, kind of expected. I mean, the Steelers, for example, are going to be very similar in their defense with, no Deshaun Elliott out there. Doesn't look like Joey Porter Jr. is really on track to play after some optimism there. So feels like both these units, both these defenses, are going to be a little shorthanded. But I do still want to stay on the defense. So talk to me a little bit just about what Mike Macdonald's doing. Obviously, Steelers fans are kind of pretty familiar with what Mike Macdonald does here on this defense. There's a lot of it's not the same as the man blitzes that Aaron Glenn had. It's a little different, right? So talk to me about what he has kind of done, the utilization of the scheme. Has it changed since his time at Baltimore? Is it similar, and kind of where are things going there?
Yeah, your audience probably knows as much about Mike Macdonald's scheme as anyone in Seattle does with all those years in Baltimore. But I don't think the scheme has changed significantly. He's obviously adapted to the players he had, and it's worth acknowledging that there's a pretty similar arc to what happened in Seattle as what happened in Baltimore. The first 8 games of last season were not great, and there were some real problems. They made some pretty significant personnel changes, specifically trading for Ernest Jones in the middle and getting rid of both their inside backers last year, Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker. Not unlike when they traded for Roquan Smith in Baltimore and things started to click, and they kind of took a really big step the second half of that year. So, he's still going to be a guy that, he specializes in creating a lot of pressure on quarterbacks without blitzing, right? Whether it's sim pressures, whether it's, just being able to run games well. This is a team that I think also could be getting back Uchenna Nwosu this week, which is an underrated addition and a guy that is one of their best two-way edge players in terms of really being able to rush the passer and defend the runs. Yeah, when I asked Mike Macdonald about Uchenna this week, he was just like, this is one of the best game runners that we have. And so I think that's just another feather for him to kind of put in the cap as he needs to. But this is a team that's really defensive line driven. Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, as we said, Jaron Reed, I think take a lot of the lead there. I think Ernest Jones is a guy that they're sending a little bit more often. This is a guy that a few years ago for the Rams led the NFL in pressures at linebacker, at inside backer, and didn't do that as much last season, but was kind of back to it in this first game with a few pressures. And then Macdonald didn't blitz that much through his career. Usually going to be in like bottom quartile of NFL defenses in blitz rate while being high up there in pressure. But there's some signals that he might be doing a little bit more blitzing this time around. And he's like, part of the plan there was Nicky Manwari, super athletic, was going to be able to be like, he got injured on a blitz that he was sent on, unfortunately. But a lot of teams were keying on Devin Witherspoon as a blitzer. And the idea was that Nicky Manwari would give them a little bit more things to think about, as well as Ernest Jones. So it's really talented at all levels and at all sides. There's not a lot of weak spots on that defense, at least when they've got their guys on there. I think that allows Mike Macdonald to call a pretty varied game depending on what he feels like is necessary against that opponent.
I think that's going to be a challenge for the Steelers. As you look at that Jets game, this offensive line, I think, is a question mark for them. So we'll see how that goes. Let's flip over to the offense. So this Seahawks offense, some really fascinating stats when you dive into it from what I've seen. The insane target share Jackson Smith and Jigba got is one of them. The other thing that I saw, wow, was this predictable? If they were under center, you knew they were probably going to run it. Not much play action. If they were in gun, they probably ran the ball. Like there just wasn't a lot of differentiation. It seemed like the Niners kind of had that keyed in by the end of the game. So first of all, let's just start from a schematic perspective. Has that been a talk over there in Seattle? Because certainly feels like right now, the Steelers are probably looking at those splits and saying, "Hey, if they're under center, don't expect them to yank that ball back. It's probably just going to go to Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet."
Yeah, this has been the biggest point of conversation this week for people looking at that game. Seahawks, pretty much all of the offseason, before even hiring Clint Kubiak, and then after him, was like, we're going to be an under center, wide zone, play action team, right? And then all of training camp, they were under center, play action, roll out, bootleg, throughout camp, even in preseason. And then this first game, Nick, there was one play action pass attempt the entire game. It was bizarre. And the under center game, they kind of got away from it in the second half. They still were under center more than, the majority of teams in the NFL, but they really went away from it in the second half until the kind of penultimate drive where they're like, all right, we need to score to take the lead. They went under center. They ran the ball. They head down there. They get a field goal. And it's like, where was that? Why was that so hard to just do what you're supposed to, what you've always said you're going to do? And you're right. The predictability was the other part of that. Shotgun, I think it was like an 80% pass rate. Under center, it was maybe a 70% run rate, or maybe those are flipped, but something like that. And so they basically tried to do some runs. They were going up against a stacked box from the 49ers quite a bit, which Steelers also do a lot of. And they tried to beat it with some quick game to the outside and screens, getting like, hey, if they're going to be all stacked in the middle, we're going to try to spread them out. That was a disaster. They were the worst quick game team in the NFL in week one. They lost 0.73 EPA per play, like almost a point per play when they ran quick game. So, we talked to Clint Kubiak yesterday, and he's heard it, and Mike Macdonald has said it. There will be more play action. There will be more movement, and that's not necessarily motion. That means moving the pocket than there was in week one. I think you can almost be certain that's going to be the case this week. But the challenge there, Nick, is if everyone knows what you're doing early downs and you're going to run the ball, you're missing the best chances to potentially surprise the defense with passing. So when they did pass on early downs, they were pretty successful, but they just didn't do it that much. They were running quite a bit.
Yeah, figured, you look at that schematically, and that's kind of the way it worked. So let's talk about the next point, which is that just crazy target share for JSN. Listen, I understand he's kind of the top dog in this offense, and it looks like he is the top dog, but other targets going to step up? Was that something that was game plan oriented, or do we think, now that guys like Jake Bobo are probably going to be back? Torrey Horton there, who was like the rave of the summer and didn't get a ton of targets. It feels like, I get it that there's not another elite pass catcher. There's not, a DK Metcalf there still, but still seems like there's enough young talent to where they can spread the ball more around. But how are they kind of using JSN, and is that kind of the function of the passing game, is just to work through him and I think he had like a 56% target share or something last week.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
It's funny. It's kind of a double-edged sword there, in that there was questions going into this season of, hey, like, can JSN truly be a number one without DK Metcalf taking, pulling coverage away? And in that sense, I think JSN showed, like, even when he's the only guy doing anything, he can still be a very productive receiver. And I think he's going to be a hard player to take away regardless of what teams do each and every week. At the same time, it's not sustainable to have that kind of target share. Like, that's obvious. And there are real questions about whether Cooper Kupp has much more to offer. And until he answers those questions on the field, they will just get louder and louder. Getting Jake Bobo back, I think, is valuable, but I would hesitate to say like Jake Bobo's a major game changer. Like, he's a good player. He's a very good run blocker. I would point out Fred Warner is one of one in this league, and he has this tendency to shut down the middle of the field. And I think that might have caused the Seahawks to be a little cautious about going over the middle. Elijah Arroyo, AJ Barner, these are guys that they really like at the tight end position that can affect the game. Maybe they were less impactful because of that. Torrey Horton didn't even get a target, and I think a lot of the routes he was running were just kind of dummy routes. And so it'll be interesting to see if they really try to work him in a little bit more. Sam Darnold said, and based on other film review, the reads were taking him to JSN. And so in some ways, in a weird way, you give Clint Kubiak a little bit of credit because there was only one snap where he went up against Diamador Lenore, their best corner, and he was able to get JSN on some advantageous matchups, and the Seahawks took advantage. So mostly it's can't do that all the time, but it's not quite as bad or negative as it might seem on the surface.
All right, that seems about right. I'm interested to see what the Steelers' plan is there at JSN. I'm kind of, the more I look at it with JPJ out, I think Ramsey's probably just going to shadow him. That's my guess, and then they'll let Slay handle the other guy, and then Brandon Eccles will be the other starter. So let's talk about the Seahawks' run game, because obviously with the Steelers' struggles in their run game, I think this is the focus for the Steelers. This is not a great interior offensive line for the Seahawks. From kind of what my view is of these players, I like Charles Cross. Abe Lucas just got his extension. So where do things kind of stand on this run game? Do you think that they're going to be able to push around this Steelers defensive line similar to the Jets? And overall, how is your feeling of this offensive line right now?
Yeah, there's a few baked in questions there. I mean, one, coming into the season, I had this game penciled as a loss just because I have a lot of respect for that Steelers defensive front and specifically their ability, to shut down the run game, TJ Watt and especially if you're going to be running outside zone and you've got some really good edge setters, that can be really tough. So at the same time, I think that the interior offensive line for the Seahawks is lesser known, but not lesser players. And so Gray Zabel is going to be one of the better guards in football for a long time. He had his first game in this week one, mostly good, some growing pains as you'd expect it to be. Jalen Sundell, who was his college roommate at North Dakota State, got his first start at center and had some rough moments. I thought that 49ers defensive front surprised me they were much better than I expected them to be. And Robert Saleh really deserves a lot of credit for that win. But Jalen Sundell also had some plays where Robert Saleh was commenting the other day that their center made some unbelievable plays or else that, they would have gotten home on a couple more blitzes. He's very good at adjusting in his pass protection and things of that nature. And then Anthony Bradford's an interesting one, is like an insane athlete for a man his size, had really, really poor first few years in the league and really turned it around this offseason. I think he understood he was about to lose his spot and had a very solid preseason, very solid training camp and won that role when there was a lot of competition for it. I thought he played pretty well against the 49ers. There were definitely some rough spots. His pass protection is never going to be great, but he can move people in the run game for sure. So the Seahawks have the potential with Gray Zabel and Charles Cross on one side and Anthony Bradford and Abe Lucas on the other side to be truly ambidextrous in the run game. I don't know how much they're going to test TJ Watt or how smart that would be. But I think that left side of the line, especially with the backside potential of Bradford and Lucas, I would think they're going to have more success running the football this week than they did last week. But part of that's just watching that Steelers run defense struggle as much as they did against the Jets.
Yeah, we'll see what adjustments the Steelers make. I think I will say this: I think they will play the run differently this week. I think there's going to be some adjustments there. Sounds like Y.A. Black is going to play more. The Steelers' rookie, who has really had just a great start, had a great preseason. I thought he played really well in week one, but he was like the DT6 in terms of snap count. So you'll see more of him this week. I think you'll see probably a little less Keanu Benton. So we'll see kind of how that all works out. But I think it's like adjustment versus adjustment. And we're still week two, so still figuring these teams out. Brian, thanks for coming on. Let people know where they can follow you, read your stuff, watch your stuff, all that great stuff.
Yeah, Nick, happy to be here. And yeah, anywhere, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, at HawkBlogger, HawkBlogger. We do show up all the time. I'm about to jump on with Mike Sando and do that in a bit. So always good stuff. And man, you've been great on our channel. So happy to come on here whenever you need.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Brian. Folks, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell here. You can check out the stuff penlive.com/Steelers, and you can follow me on all social media platforms at Farabaugh FB.